The old map of Northern Europe is gone. What once looked like empty, cold space between NATO, the Baltic, and the High North is now being welded together, piece by piece, road by road, port by port, island by island, into something far more dangerous and far more deliberate. And right at the center of that transformation sits Sweden, no longer looking like just another European military power, but increasingly like a hardened, artillery-backed fortress being built into NATO's northern front line. And that matters more than most people realize, because in any war in the north, speed is not just important, it is everything. The side that detects first, moves first, reinforces first, and strikes first gains the advantage, and Sweden is rapidly becoming one of the few countries in Europe positioned to shape all four. This is not only about bigger guns, more troops, or stronger defenses. This is about building an entire system of power, a system designed to control access, deny movement, and turn geography itself into a weapon. And by the end of this video, you will understand why Sweden's artillery is only the visible part of the story, because the real power rising here is the military machine behind it. The infrastructure, the mobility, the planning, the positioning, the network that can decide who arrives in time and who is destroyed before they even have a chance to react. For decades, Sweden held a strange and almost uncomfortable place inside Europe's security order. It was serious, capable, advanced, and strategically essential, deeply tied to the West in every practical sense, yet still formally outside NATO. That contradiction created a problem no one could fully solve in peacetime, because everyone knew Sweden mattered in a crisis, but no one had fully locked its role into the alliance system. Now that ambiguity is collapsing. The North is being redrawn in real time, and Sweden is no longer the quiet state standing beside the map. It is becoming one of the hands redrawing it. But before we go deeper, take a second to like the video and subscribe, because more than 98% of viewers watch without subscribing.
On the map, Sweden always looked like the piece everyone understood was important, even when no one had fully admitted just how important it really was. Sitting between Norway facing the North Atlantic, Finland pressed against Russia's edge, and the Baltic states further south, Sweden was never just another Nordic country. In any real crisis, everyone knew the same thing. Swedish territory would matter, Swedish airspace would matter, Swedish ports would matter, Swedish industry would matter. But for years, the legal structure and military architecture around that reality remained unfinished, like a house built with strong load-bearing walls but no final roof to seal it together. It looked solid, but it was incomplete. Then Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine shattered that illusion in a way Europe could no longer ignore. The old ambiguity died in public. Finland entered NATO on April 4, 2023. Sweden followed on March 7, 2024. And in that moment, the northern map did not just shift, it was rewritten. NATO itself said Sweden's accession strengthens the alliance in the High North and the Baltic Sea. And yes, that sounds like polished diplomatic language, but translated into military reality, it means something much harder and much more dangerous for Moscow. It means a major gray zone just vanished. It means one of the most strategically valuable spaces in Northern Europe is no longer hanging between systems. It has been pulled directly into the alliance machine. And that is where the fortress truly begins. Not with some dramatic movie shot of tanks charging through a snowstorm, not with a cinematic speech, not with the noise of headlines, but with the quiet things that sound boring in peacetime and become terrifying in war. Agreements, corridors, stockpiles, joint planning, access rights, reinforcement routes, the hidden machinery of deterrence. Sweden's Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States entered into force on August 15, 2024. Then, on November 21, 2024, Nordic defense ministers signed a letter of intent to develop strategic military transport corridors across the region. And Sweden's government has made it clear that its role in NATO is not about passive membership or symbolic flag-waving. It is about active integration into northern deterrence, including serving as a framework nation for NATO's forward land forces in Finland. That is a massive difference. That is the difference between being near the front and becoming part of the machine that holds the front together when the pressure comes. And once you understand that, the next part of the story becomes even more important, because now we zoom in on the weapon that gives all of this steel, speed, and planning its sharpest edge: Archer, Sweden's wheeled 155mm self-propelled howitzer.
On paper, Archer is an artillery platform, but in practice, it is something even more dangerous. It is a timing weapon. It fires fast, moves fast, disappears fast, and survives by refusing to remain where the enemy expects it to be. That matters everywhere, but in Northern Europe, it matters even more, because this is not easy terrain. This is a battle space of long roads, narrow approaches, dense forests, exposed junctions, frozen ground, marshy seasons, and brutal distances that turn every movement into a test of endurance. In that environment, every bridge matters, every choke point matters, every delay becomes deadly, and that means artillery is not just there to destroy targets, it is there to edit the map itself. It decides where an enemy column cannot gather, where it cannot slow down, where it cannot stop, where it cannot breathe, and where its logistics begin to collapse under fire. That is what makes Archer so important. It is not just a gun, it is a tool for denying space, stealing time, and turning geography into punishment. And Sweden is clearly not treating Archer like a flashy prestige system meant for headlines and military parades. In September 2023, Sweden awarded BAE Systems a contract for 48 additional Archer artillery systems. Then, in March 2025, the Swedish government authorized procurement of 18 more Archer units for donation to Ukraine, on top of the 8 already donated earlier. And inside that one decision are actually two separate stories. The first story is the obvious one. Sweden believes modern artillery matters enough to keep buying it, expanding it, and keeping the industrial line alive. But the second story is deeper and honestly much more important. A country preparing for serious, sustained, high-end deterrence does not think in one-off announcements or short-lived political theater. It thinks in production. It thinks in output. It thinks in continuity. It thinks in what can be built again and again when the emergency stops being hypothetical. And that is the real signal here. Sweden is not acting like a country making gestures. It is acting like a country preparing for a long, hard era where the North is no longer a quiet corner of Europe, but one of the most critical military spaces on the continent. It thinks in maintenance. It thinks in barrels, trucks, ammunition, crews, spare parts, repair cycles, and doctrine, because that is how a real artillery wall is built. Not by admiring firepower from a distance, but by making that firepower constant, sustainable, and brutally normal. And that is the moment this story becomes bigger than any one gun system. Because artillery by itself is not a fortress. Artillery inside a living, moving, supported network is. That is the transformation Sweden is now driving. Under its total defense resolution for 2025 to 2030, Sweden is pouring more than 170 billion Swedish kroner into military defense, and another 37.5 billion Swedish kroner into civil defense through 2030, with defense spending projected to reach 2.6% of GDP in 2028. And that scale tells you everything. Sweden is not buying a few extra capabilities so officials in Brussels can nod politely and call it progress. Sweden is rebuilding depth, military depth, industrial depth, civil depth. The kind of depth that matters when a crisis stops being theoretical and starts arriving in convoys, aircraft, casualties, and supply shortages. The government itself described these as historically large investments and the most substantial reinforcement of total defense in a generation. And that phrase matters because total defense is not just about more soldiers or more hardware. It means more formations ready to move, more ammunition ready to be used, more resilience under pressure, more capacity to absorb shocks, and more ability to operate as part of NATO's actual war plans instead of its comfortable peacetime routines. That is the logistics of the fortress. Now here comes the geography, and this is where the picture sharpens even further. Sweden sits at one of the most important military interceptions in all of Europe. To the west lies Norway and the route toward the North Atlantic and the Arctic maritime approaches. To the east lies Finland and NATO's long exposed land frontier with Russia.
To the south and southeast lies the Baltic Sea, the Baltic states, and the fragile web of ports, sea lanes, cables, and air routes that keep the region connected, supplied, and defensible. And right in the middle of all of that sits Sweden, the connector, the buffer, the corridor, the hinge. Its territory offers strategic depth. Its roads and railways matter for movement. Its ports matter for reinforcement. Its airspace matters for operations across the north. Its industry matters for sustainment when the fighting does not end quickly. And then there is Gotland, that island sitting in the Baltic like a permanent strategic argument no military planner can ignore. Because whoever can defend Gotland, use Gotland, and hold Gotland shapes surveillance, sea control, air defense, and reinforcement options across much of the central Baltic basin. In strategic terms, Sweden does not just add another flag to NATO's map, it adds the central hinge that helps the whole northern structure turn. That was always the deeper plan. But here is what that plan means in practice, and this is where the danger becomes real. If tension rises on NATO's northern flank, the alliance's biggest question is no longer simply, can we respond? The real question is far more urgent and far more unforgiving. Can we respond before the first damage becomes irreversible? Can reinforcements move before ports are threatened, before junctions are cut, before sea lanes are contested, before airspace becomes too dangerous, before the window to stabilize the front slams shut? And that is exactly why Sweden matters so much now. Because in the north, victory may not belong to the side with the loudest rhetoric or even the largest force on paper. It may belong to the side that can connect the map faster, move through it harder, and hold it longer. And Sweden is increasingly being built for exactly that moment.
That is exactly where Sweden's artillery wall becomes something far more dangerous than just a collection of guns. Because long before infantry ever collides on the ground, artillery begins shaping the battle in silence, shaping time, shaping space, shaping choices before the enemy fully understands what is happening. It can shield road movement, strike assembly areas, punish any attempt to mass forces, throw convoys off schedule, turn bridge crossings into death traps, and drag rear area logistics straight into the front line. And in the north, where the distances are vast, the terrain is unforgiving, and the number of usable routes is limited, that effect becomes even more brutal. One well-positioned battery can make an entire sector feel untouchable, almost radioactive, a place where movement itself starts to look like a gamble with destruction. And once those batteries are tied into NATO planning, Nordic mobility corridors, maritime surveillance, and joint air activity, what emerges is no longer just extra firepower. It becomes something colder, smarter, and far more intimidating. A regional denial network built to slow, fracture, and punish an advancing force before it can ever build momentum. And Sweden is not stopping at conventional firepower. It is layering that power with smarter, deadlier munitions designed to attack with precision and create something every army fears most: hesitation. The June 2025 contract for 155mm bonus munitions made that unmistakably clear. These are not shells meant simply to add more explosions to the battlefield. They are built to hunt armor from above, using sensor-fused submunitions to strike mechanized forces at the exact moment they try to gather strength. That tells you everything about how Sweden sees the threat. This is not abstract bombardment. This is targeted denial. This is about turning forest roads, staging zones, exposed approaches, and movement corridors into places armored columns do not want to enter and cannot afford to remain. Conventional shells create pressure. Precision-guided and sensor-fused shells create fear. And when pressure and fear work together, they produce hesitation. And hesitation in a real deterrence environment is priceless, because hesitation delays movement. Delay breaks timing, and broken timing can collapse an offensive before it ever reaches full force. But the fortress Sweden is building is not a fortress of artillery alone. It is a fortress of layers, and that is what makes it so much harder to crack. The major January 2026 investment in ground-based air defense matters for exactly that reason, because artillery without air defense may be powerful, but it is also exposed. In any serious modern conflict, the systems meant to stop an enemy on land will themselves be hunted from above by drones, by reconnaissance, by precision strike, by missile attack, and by relentless air pressure. Sweden clearly understands that. So the answer now taking shape is the right one, and the dangerous one.
Firepower protected by mobility, protected by air defense, protected by wider alliance integration. That is how the wall survives. Not because it is static, but because it is layered, shielded, and built to absorb punishment while continuing to fire back. And this is the moment where NATO's northern flank stops sounding like a slogan and starts looking like a machine. Sweden's role in Baltic Sentry after the damage to underwater cables in the Baltic Sea region showed that this transformation is already reaching beyond land warfare and into the wider defense of the region's arteries, its infrastructure, its surveillance picture, and its maritime security. With warships, radar surveillance, and alliance coordination now tied into the same broader defensive architecture, Sweden is no longer just preparing to defend territory. It is helping build a system designed to protect the entire northern battlespace, from roads and ports to coastlines and cables. And that is the real story here. Sweden is not building a loud fortress, it is building a living one. A fortress with guns, sensors, corridors, ships, air defenses, and alliances all working together. A fortress that does not just wait for conflict, but shapes the battlefield before conflict can fully begin.
In 2026, Sweden's own foreign policy statement pushed the message even further, and if you read it carefully, the full shape of the northern fortress starts to come into view. Sweden is not just standing beside NATO's northern defense anymore, it is helping organize it, helping power it, helping hold it together. Stockholm highlighted its role as the framework nation for NATO's forward land forces in Finland, and it made clear that Sweden would also contribute fighter aircraft to NATO's Arctic Sentry. That is not a small detail, that is the blueprint. Because the northern fortress is not just maritime, and it is not just aerial, and it is not just land-based. It is all of those things at once. It is also infrastructural. It is a defended system stretching from vulnerable undersea cables in the Baltic to the contested skies of the Arctic, from ports and depots to radar coverage and reinforcement routes. This is not one front line running neatly across a map. It is a living defense network, and NATO's nightmare is simple: no corridor, no reinforcement, no defense. That is the scenario the alliance is trying to prevent, and Sweden is now one of the countries making sure that nightmare becomes much harder to turn into reality. That is why the Nordic letter of intent on military mobility matters so much, even though on paper it sounds dry and bureaucratic. Armies do not teleport just because politicians make strong speeches. Tanks do not appear by magic. Heavy equipment needs roads that can carry the weight, rail lines that can support transport, ferries and ports that can move cargo, staging areas to organize the flow, legal permissions to cross borders, fuel to keep moving, recovery support when things break, engineers when routes are damaged, and host nation planning to make the whole machine function under pressure. In peacetime, that sounds administrative. In wartime, it becomes the dividing line between an alliance that arrives in time and an alliance that arrives too late, issuing furious statements after the damage is already done. Sweden's role in those corridors, combined with its geography and now its NATO status, turns it into something far more powerful than a frontline state. It turns it into a reinforcement engine for the North. And an artillery-heavy reinforcement engine is exactly the kind of thing that destroys invasion timetables, because it adds not only more force, but more endurance, more depth, more ability to keep the region connected under fire. Of course, Russia still has tools: long-range strikes, cyber pressure, hybrid attacks, sabotage against infrastructure, pressure in the Baltic, threats in the high north. All of that remains real. None of it disappears just because Sweden buys more howitzers, strengthens air defenses, or signs more agreements. But that is precisely why Stockholm's defense policy is broader than the gun line. Sweden's total defense concept ties military power directly to civil resilience, because a modern fortress cannot survive on weapons alone. More money is going not just into units and ammunition, but into the wider system that keeps society working when pressure hits. Infrastructure protection, civil preparedness, municipal planning, local coordination, supply continuity. The ability to keep moving, keep communicating, and keep functioning even when someone is actively trying to break the network apart. That is what a fortress looks like in 2026. It is not just bunkers, wire, and concrete. It is cables, depots, ports, air defenses,
logistics hubs, local authorities, and ordinary people who already know exactly what their job is when the lights flicker and the pressure begins. And this is the part many people still miss. Sweden's artillery wall does not matter because it makes the North invulnerable. It matters because it changes the cost curve. That is what real deterrence is. Not magic, not invincibility. Cost, delay, risk, confusion. The goal is to make any hostile military planner study the map, look at the Baltic, look at Finland, look at Sweden's depth, look at Gotland, look at the reinforcement routes, look at the surveillance picture, and come to one cold conclusion. The opening phase of any campaign would now be slower, bloodier, more dangerous, and far less predictable than before. And that matters enormously in the North, because speed is everything for an aggressor. Speed is how surprise is exploited. Speed is how alliances are fractured before they fully react. Speed is how early gains are turned into strategic shock. Sweden helps take that speed away. And once you take speed away from an aggressor, you often do not just slow the plan down, you begin to break the plan itself.
There is also a warning in all of this for the rest of Europe, and it is impossible to ignore once you see it clearly. Real deterrence is not built with speeches, and it is definitely not built by rolling out one polished prototype under dramatic lights as if it is performing at some Defense Expo talent show. Deterrence is built by output. It is built by what a nation can keep producing, keep repairing, keep training, keep supplying, and keep fielding when the pressure is no longer theoretical. And that is exactly the lesson Sweden is now putting on display. Continued Archer production, bonus ammunition contracts, broader defense investments, stronger formations, deeper civil resilience, all of it points in the same direction. The countries that will matter most in Europe's next security era will not be the ones that make the loudest announcements. They will be the ones that can sustain capability when the headlines fade and the demands of real deterrence begin. Factories matter, ammunition stocks matter, training pipelines matter, maintenance matters, spare parts matter, industrial endurance matters. The Northern Fortress is not appearing overnight in one dramatic moment. It is being built piece by piece, one practical decision at a time, until the structure becomes too solid to dismiss. So when we say Sweden's artillery wall is helping turn NATO's northern flank into a fortress, we are saying something much bigger than Sweden has good guns. The guns are only the sharp edge. The real story is the architecture behind them. NATO membership, US access, Nordic mobility corridors, Baltic infrastructure protection, forward land forces in Finland, air defense expansion. Civil preparedness, industrial production, regional geography finally aligned with regional planning. That is the real transformation. Sweden is no longer a strategically useful non-member sitting nearby, important but incomplete. It is now one of the countries helping weld the northern flank into a single defended space, a space that is harder to isolate, harder to surprise, harder to fracture, and far more dangerous to challenge. And that may be the most important point of all, because the strongest fortress is often the one that never has to prove itself in battle. The best artillery wall is the one that convinces an enemy convoy not to start its engines in the first place. Somewhere in the next crisis, that may be the quiet victory no camera ever captures. No dramatic breakthrough, no famous battle, no iconic footage of the turning point. Just an invasion plan that never leaves the drawer, because the roads look covered, the sea looks watched, the sky looks crowded, the island in the Baltic looks armed, and the northern flank no longer looks open. It looks fortified, it looks connected, it looks prepared, and above all, it looks brutally expensive to touch. If you found this deep dive valuable, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about the technology, strategy, and military systems shaping modern warfare. The next few years are going to be critical, and we will be here to follow every development. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.